Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through the quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world, don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark.
Story 1. When I was a kid, everyone I know played a horrible prank on me. This is something I should probably be speaking about with a therapist. I know, I would, or I have been, but that's not really an option anymore. In fact, I couldn't tell you how many times I've told this story to various medical professionals. I'm 30 now, 20 years since it happened. I just want to stop. I was a pretty average kid, I think. A little weird, but every kid is a little weird. I had an older sister, and we fought like two cats. I had a couple good friends, most of whom lived on my street or one street over, and we would meet after school and play until it was time for dinner. My life was fairly ideal. I played soccer, I think. Honestly, I have a lot of trouble remembering much of my childhood. But I remember that I got a Nintendo DS for my 10th birthday, and we had a big party in the backyard. Practically the whole neighborhood showed up. My birthday was just before school got out for the summer, so the air buzzed with excitement, and the evening was warm and felt more alive than other nights. The grown-ups started a fire in our little fire pit, and they sat around it and drank beer while we ran around. I was allowed to stay up past when I usually went to bed, and the other kids chased fireflies with me and roasted marshmallows until late. I remember going to bed happy, excited for summer, and exhausted. I fell asleep quickly. The peel and stick glow in the dark stars and moon shining on the ceiling above my head. Waking up the day after my birthday, something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it. I hadn't had a nightmare. Wasn't that? I had slept better than I could really remember ever sleeping. It was late. I realized that must be it. My mom usually woke me up around 8 if it wasn't school day. She said it was a good habit to be in the routine of waking up early and starting your day on the right foot. By the light streaming in from my windows and the slightly muggy heat in the room, I figured it was already 10 a.m. or so. I smiled, sliding out of bed. It must have been one final birthday treat, letting me sleep in. She had let me sleep in the day before too, of course, although on my birthday itself, I had wanted to get up as early as possible. Mom, I called into the hallway, poking my head out the door. No answer. I frowned. It was Saturday, so my dad was definitely already at work, but my mom wouldn't be. My sister wouldn't be home either. She had left the night before to spend the night at her friend's house. She was 13 now, and allowed to have sleepovers, for which I was eternally jealous. I decided she must be out front in the garden. I put on a shirt and left my room. I smelled coffee, but there was none left in the pot. There were dishes in the sink, too, with remnants of eggs stuck to a pan. It wasn't necessarily alarming, but it was strange. Even on days I slept in, there was always breakfast left over for me. I opened the front door, opening my mouth to call out to my mom, but I instantly froze. Halfway up our walkway was the mailman. He was on the ground, sprawled out awkwardly on the cement. Fresh blood pooled beneath him in a gruesome splatter. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't move. His limbs were bent at horrible angles. His face pointed away from me. It almost looked like some omnipotent force, had lifted him into the air and then slammed him back down. The package he must have been delivering lay a few feet away, the cardboard dented and soaked in red. I didn't need any confirmation he was dead. It wasn't a question. I had never seen a dead person before. Sometimes my parents had watched horror movies, but that hardly counted. I backed into the house and closed the door behind me. My mind was racing too fast, and my heart felt like it might burst out of my chest. Everything in my body was reeling, so much so that all I could do was move slowly in a faux sense of calm. Mom! I called out again into the silent house, my voice breaking. Mom, are you home? Something happened outside. Mom. No one answered. The house felt way too quiet. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. I had to brace myself against the wall as I made my way to my parents' room because I was almost shaking too hard to hold myself up. "Mom?" I pushed open her bedroom door. It creaked, the sound almost deafening against the silence that blanketed the room. Our old gray cat, Gumbo, weaseled her way through the crack and slipped out into the hallway, brushing against my leg on her way. I saw a lump in the bed. For a moment, I thought it was just pillows, but then I realized it couldn't have been. The bed was made, and all the pillows were accounted for leaning against a headboard. "Mom, are you asleep?" It came out as a whisper. Even though it wasn't like I had been trying not to wake her up, I wanted her awake badly. I think I just somehow already knew. Something was hanging in the air, this heaviness, like the whole world had been blanketed in a thing that was empty and hot and dead. A desert popped into my head, a place that was so far away from everything and completely devoid of anything, devoid of life. When I pulled back the covers, the shock washed over me like an electric zap. Every one of my veins and bones and muscles felt 20 degrees hotter than they should have been. There was blood everywhere. I could barely see any section of the sheets that wasn't soaked in it. It looked like the cherry juice we sometimes made from the tree in our backyard, squashing the berries with our hands and laughing as the sticky syrup trickled down our wrists. Her eyes were open. Her mouth was open too, wide open, like she was about to scream. I gagged, stumbling backwards and almost falling down. My legs felt like they wouldn't work anymore. I was in a daze as I stumbled back to the kitchen. The eggs on the pan seemed like they were mocking me now. I knew my parents had told me what to do in an emergency, but all of that was gone from me now. This didn't feel like an emergency. It felt more like a horrible nightmare. I pinched myself on the arm, just in case. The neighbors, that was it. I was supposed to call my neighbors. The number was on a sticky note next to the phone. My fingers shook as I dialed the number. They picked up after 3 rings that felt like they took 1 year each. I heard a sort of crackling sound, like someone was moving the phone around. "Hello? Hi." I cleared my throat, trying to get rid of the lump firmly lodged at the back of my tongue. "This is Jackson from next door." I heard some sort of giggle, a choked one, like they were trying to hold it back, and then some hushed whispering. "Hi, Jackson," the voice said. I assumed it was the mother, Mrs. Winston. "Is everything all right? Can I help you with something?" As something happened, my mom... "Oh, honey," Mrs. Winston said, her tone gentle, but something about it felt deeply off. My stomach twisted. "Why don't you head on over here? HM? We'll figure out what's going on together." "Okay." I remember hanging up before she said anything else. Something about her voice was unnerving me. Still, I had nowhere else to go. I slipped out the back door so I wouldn't have to walk past the mailman, Gumbo watching me go. I knocked on the neighbor's door. No answer. I knocked again. Still nothing. I stepped into the flower beds, peering in through the windows. Someone was lying on the couch, their head tilted back like they were staring up at the ceiling. For a moment, that was what I thought was happening, until I saw that their chest was open up like a patient on a surgery table. All guts and organs and blood. So much blood. It was Mr. Wilson, in his sweater vest and brown dad shorts. Dead like the mailman. Dead like my mom. Something came over me, and I burst through their front door. It was unlocked, which I hadn't really expected. So I went tumbling into the room, landing on my stomach, my face slamming into the floor, face to face with Mrs. Wilson, who lay dead in front of the phone. Her eyes were open too. There was a fly on one of them, crawling across the white, pausing every few seconds to rub its hands together. I had started to cry. It was finally hitting me that this was real, not some dream, and I desperately wanted my mom. I scrambled to my feet, nearly throwing up when I realized my face was covered in her blood. I swiped at it with my hands, trying to wipe it away as quickly as possible. Then, instinctively, I licked my lips. Horrified, I braced myself for the coppery taste of the blood on my tongue, but it never came. It was sweet. I hesitated, trembling incessantly, before cautiously raising one of my red fingers to my lips. Sweet. Memories flooded my mind. Memories of baking with my grandmother, the sweet syrup we would sometimes pour into the mixing bowls. It was fucking corn syrup. I ran to my father's work, which was on the other side of town. By the time I got there, I was close to passing out and drenched in sweat. But it made it a little easier to get here with the road completely devoid of cars. There were some parked on the side of the road, or every now and then in the middle of it, but none of them had people in them. Some of them had blood, thick and red and gooey blood. The nice receptionist that was always at the front desk and always gave me candy when my dad brought me in had her head against the computer. Her hair was matted with red liquid, as if someone had ripped out entire chunks of her scalp. Before I could think too hard about it, I wiped my finger across the side of her head and licked it. It was sweet too. I felt like my brain was going to break, like I was standing on the edge of something completely incomprehensible. I shook the woman. She flopped like a rag doll. I sobbed, shoving her, and she slumped to the ground, her head knocking against the tiles. Wake up. I screamed at her. I know you're not dead. She didn't move an inch, just stared, unblinking, her mouth hanging half open. I ran into the room my dad usually worked in, scanning it for his workspace. I couldn't remember where it was, just that it was around halfway back and close to the wall. In every cubicle someone was dead. Sometimes they looked halfway peaceful, as if they'd been caught by surprise, but most of them were eviscerated in one way or another. Entrails hanging out, bones showing, blood sprayed against the walls, even some with faces ripped clean off. It was like something unseeable had swept through the town on a rampage, but all of their blood was made of corn syrup. In a brave moment, I even touched one of the organs, something that looked like a strange deflated balloon, and it jiggled, but more like plastic than a human body part. At one point, I swore I heard a giggle behind me. I whipped around, but no one was there. I found my dad at the water cooler, sitting against the wall, cone paper cup still gripped loosely in his hand. He stared straight ahead, blood leaking from his eyes, nose, and mouth, like he'd exploded from the inside. Dad, I whispered, grabbing his shoulder. This isn't funny. Please stop. There was a strange look on his face that I could just barely make out through the red, almost like a smile someone would only make if they were trying very hard not to. I walked back home down the middle of the road, balancing on the yellow lines to have something to focus on, because I was fairly certain if I stopped walking, I wouldn't start again. When I got there, I climbed into bed and I closed my eyes. I didn't know what else to do. Eventually, after what must have been hours and hours of lying there, I drifted off into a restless sleep. I woke up to someone shaking my shoulder. I screamed, scrambling away from them, immediately wide awake and terrified. Whoa! My mom backed away, smiling. Sorry, buddy, I didn't mean to scare you. I was breathing hard. I looked her over, clutching my chest. She was completely fine. She looked it. At least, she stood there in a white blouse and blue jeans, her hair tied up like always, her eyes bright and happy. What day is it? Her smile faded, and she frowned a little. It was then that I noticed the smell of bacon wafting in from the kitchen. It's Sunday, Bud, remember? 2 days after my birthday. So, yesterday had been real? What happened yesterday? She placed the back of her hand on my forehead, tooting softly. Did one of those neighborhood kids you play with get you sick, honey? Do you feel okay? I dropped it, because I didn't know what to say. I convinced myself maybe I really was sick, maybe it had been some kind of feverish hallucination, and I was so relieved to see her, I didn't want to think about any of it anymore. I went to eat breakfast, sitting at the table between my dad and my sister, and everything was normal. But when I left the house later that day, I saw it, on the walkway leading up to our house. There was something pink on the pavement, a faint pink stain, like something sweet and red and sticky had been recently scrubbed away. Like I said, it's been 30 years. I've been feeling like I had almost recovered from that incident. I had asked everyone I knew countless times about that day, but none of them seemed to have any idea what I was talking about. But still, I had almost let it go, and it had never happened again. Not until today. Today, when I walked into my therapist's office, it seemed strangely quiet. There was usually music playing, something soothing and soft, and there were people in the waiting room and at the front desk typing on a keyboard. But today, nothing. No one. Silence. I let myself into Dr. Sheldon's office. Perplexed, which is when I found her dead on the carpet. Her blood sprayed across all the walls, even dripping from the ceiling. It was crazy, I know that, but I immediately tasted it. Sweet. I rolled her over, and her eyes were open, a strange smile on her face. This time I did something I didn't think to do as a kid. I checked her pulse. She's alive. I don't know what to do. I can't believe they're doing this to me again. Do they think this is funny? Story 2. Frog Lake. I used to do small-scale construction work with a private firm out in rural Minnesota, mostly private jobs. Someone needs a new deck or wants to build a guest house on the edge of their property. This isn't really the I want a custom pool kind of people. They're more like, I need a fence to protect from swine migration. We were contacted by a company that worked with the government on a larger environmental project. The money for it had been earmarked for years. But for one reason or another, now they decided to pull the trigger. I guess they were afraid their funding would get cut before they got the chance to finish. So they pulled in every contractor in the area to help. And that's where I come in. Me and my crew had never worked in environmental project before. We didn't even know what that really meant. They were offering good money though, so we figured we'd hear them out. My boss, Brogan, had a meeting with one of their reps. It took about 30 minutes. Then he just stepped out, gave us a nod and stated, "We're doing this." We got set up in an apartment complex on the outskirts of a small Minnesota town called Tomskog. There was this little welcome sign with a blue sunflower on it. Strange place, not as an outright hostile, but you see things that make you stop and think, like how there's always a guy waiting for the bus, or how there's this one apartment that always keeps an open window. Little things like that. Me and the crew were set up in small, fully furnished temp apartments. The project had a timeline of 2 months of intense work, so we had our jobs cut out for us. Our employer was a subsidiary of a larger company with a big hatchet for a logo, and they were pulling out all the stops. I saw trucks with the company logo rolling through town 24/7. My boss was nowhere near the top of the hierarchy. We're talking a crew of well over 200 people pulled from all ends of the state, mostly private contractors, but at least 40 or so were in-house company hires. You could tell by the color of their hard hats. We were told the project was a conservation effort. The town and the nearby area have been riddled with various invasive species, and this was a last-ditch effort to keep it from spreading. It wasn't clear what kind of invasive species we were talking about, but I figured it was frogs. The place was crawling with them. Big, fat ones that looked like cow turds. We got set up around a part of town called Frog Lake. A lot of locals weren't too happy about it, so we had to put up fences. No one could get in or out. We had armed guards patrolling the perimeter. We had to block off a trail going all around the lake, which caused a bit of a stir. There was also the issue of restricting road access. A lot of residential houses were lined up around that lake, so we had to dig temporary roads to provide highway access. That was part of my immediate responsibilities. Heavy machinery. Digging mostly. After the first week, they cornered off a specific part of the lake. We were working on building sandbanks, allowing us to effectively separate a corner of the lake from the rest. I wasn't clear on why exactly we were doing it, but being knowledgeable wasn't part of the contract. I just had to drive the hardware and go where I was told. Then they brought in the pumps. For industrial-sized water pumps. They were going to drain a corner of the lake. That's why we separated it. I had no idea how this might help some kind of conservation effort. But there were far more educated people than me on site that knew what they were doing. At least I think they did. They looked the part. Day 10, the pumps got going. The trucks going in and out of town were replaced with water tanks. Once the water level began to sink, I started seeing men in white hazmat suits going down into the banks with gas tanks on their backs. They were dousing the lake with a kind of chlorine gas. You could smell it all the way into town. They must have killed tens of thousands of frogs with that. That didn't help them much, though. You know the water pumps? They got jammed constantly. You know how many frogs got to swim into a water pump to bypass the pump filters and clog it? So many that you start to think it's not an accident anymore. So many, in fact, that you start to think they won't die. The mechanics were working overtime. I mean, even more overtime than the rest of us. But week 2, that corner of the lake was drained. I was taking off heavy-duty work to check the infrastructure. Turns out, the bottom of the lake wasn't quite as empty as one might have imagined. In fact, there was an entire building left down there on the very bottom. It kind of looked like a church. Brogan came up to me one day on my lunch break. He sat down next to me as we looked down at the drained lake. There were still guys in white pushing chlorine gas. We'd gotten used to the smell by then. Brogan offered me the bottom half of his sandwich. I told him no mayo, he sighed. It's like this town has it out for us. They're not big fans, I said. There's always a couple lined up around the fence. They're just curious, he said, shrugging it off. But yeah, I don't suppose they're eager to have us here. I figured they would be. I mean, we're dealing with a problem, right? Brogan didn't answer. He just turned his attention back to the lake pit and took a swig of his Gatorade. I didn't press the question. He explained that I was going down there to help the construction crew. They were considering what to do with the church, and in the meantime, they needed some work done. Some stairs going into the lake, a rail to hold on to, and a couple construction trailers for the on-site crew. They were already rolling in a crane, and they were flattening the ground into a ramp to allow trucks to go down. It was a massive undertaking. I ended up working on the stairs for a couple of days until I heard a guy call out that they needed someone with interior safety experience. The guy had a blue hat, so he was a company man. I figured I might get a bonus, so I volunteered. I have more certifications than I care to recite, and he just needed someone to check the one submerged church to see if it was safe to inspect. So in a twist of fate, that was my new assignment. This church was bigger than you think. The whole thing had been submerged in that lake for God knows how long. There was a bell tower, but the bell was long since gone. From a quick outside check, it looked sturdy enough, almost like the water had preserved it. Whoever built it had done one hell of a job making sure the wood wouldn't rot straight through. When I finally made the call to go inside, I have to admit, I was frightened. The place was airtight, and there is so much algae buildup that all the light gets swallowed. All I had was a flashlight and the headlamps of a curious crew peering through the front doors. I was surprised. The pews were still there. I could see the altar and the cross. There were doors leading further in, but the walls were so covered in natural wear and tear that you could barely make them out from the rest of the wall. I figured I shouldn't press my luck until I'd assessed the structural integrity. It was a strange building. If you ignore the multitudes of frogs lurking under pews, the ceiling itself had a couple of unusual details. It seemed that the entire building was built to withstand staying underwater for prolonged periods of time. It was almost as if whoever made it had anticipated this thing would sink. Almost as if that was the intent all along. I had to battle for space with a variety of frogs, but eventually I made the call that the building was safe enough to traverse. Not so much that we could set up heavy machinery, but enough that we could have a couple of people move through it at any given time. I was charged with setting up some construction lights and a steel grated floor. I thought I was going to work alone until the basic safety measures were put up, but that didn't turn out to be the case. One morning when I entered the church, there was already someone there. She was around my age and wore a white hard hat, signaling government official rather than company bigwig or private contractor. She wore bright clothes as a contrast to her darker skin, but had these almost unnaturally bright eyes. You could tell she was a bit of a big deal, though. She wasn't covered in mud like the rest of us, and she had an iPad for a clipboard. But more than anything else, she had a smile that could burn straight through a stone. The first time she looked at me, it felt like staring into the sun. "Hi there," she said. "I'm Eva." "Hey there," I said, introducing myself. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to assess your work," she said. "You know what it's like. One man digs. 3 foremen check the shovel for damages. 2 more sketch up insurance claims. Don't I know it? So you're babysitting then? For now, just pretend like I'm not here. Easier said than done. I hadn't expected it to come off as flirty, but it did. She didn't seem to mind, though, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear without breaking eye contact. A man could fall in love with less. Eva helped me a little when she was around, mostly with setting up the graded floor. Without it, it felt like walking on black ice. One wrong step would send you to the ER with a displaced shoulder. As we worked, we'd make small talk about a little of everything. Previous jobs we'd worked, craziest client stories, the usual shtick. She seemed to be more of a desk jockey, not having all too many stories of her own. She enjoyed listening to mine, though. I think it's great we're doing this, she added. I wanted to see this place for a long time. I thought we were here for frogs. I said, environmental project, right? Right, she agreed, but I still wanted to see this place. You know anything about it? Scandinavian settler church, early 19th century. They were here long before the Homestead Act, so they were eager, to say the least. It's strange, right? How they built it to survive being submerged. Many coastal communities prepared for flash flooding. They took that with them when they moved inland. I gave her a curious look as she rolled her eyes. So I like history. Sue me. I don't think that's a criminal offense. Maybe civil. She snorted and shook her head. As we secured more of the church over a couple of days, I started seeing less of Eva. I figured she had tons of people to keep in check, and had used her time with me as a sort of break. It's one thing to handle an entire team in need of management and oversight, and another thing to keep an eye on one stubborn man with a screwdriver. Still, I'd begun to look forward to seeing her there. If I'm honest, it was the best part of my day. I'd done some more work reinforcing a couple of frames around the windows. I got word that they were going to take them out entirely. Just plopped them out of the frame. Brogan wasn't saying it outright, but it seemed they were either going to demolish the whole building or dismantle it to a point where it'd be unrecognizable. It was a bit sad. This thing had been standing for well over 100 years, and now it was going down without an explanation. I couldn't imagine this was all because of the frogs. Hell, most of them were dead. You could hardly smell the chlorine anymore. I noticed someone having broken down the doors to the back of the church. It was the one part I'd been asking for a confirmation to do, so someone must have gotten to it before I did, figuring I had to go ahead to check. I did a bit of exploration on my own. The back of the church had a storage area and a staircase leading up to the old bell tower. There was a small space for the priest to prepare sermons and keep records. It was incredible in a way. Although most of the furniture had rotted away, you could tell what was supposed to go where. There was a corner meant for a desk and a chair, and right next to it, there were bookshelves. Most of them were still intact. No books, though. I set up a couple more lights there, only to realize I wasn't alone. I turned to see Eva standing at the entrance with a flashlight. Just so you know, we don't have clearance to go in yet, she said, so this might get us in a bit of trouble. I looked at her, but she didn't budge. She wasn't about to move anytime soon. You don't seem to mind. I noted. Not yet, she smiled. I must admit, I'm curious about this place. I feel like it's telling a story. An old one, for sure. For sure. We opened the door to the bell tower staircase. The stairs were absolutely demolished, but there was a path leading into a cellar. There was something bright down there, making me think someone had already been down to set up lights. Eva tapped me on the shoulder. You mind if I ask you something? She said. Is it true they're planning to bring this place down? That's more your pay grade than mine, I said. I just go where I'm told. I know, but I'm just being paid to double check things. I'm not really in the loop. Well, they're taking down the windows. I explained. They've thought about dismantling the front rooms. The entrance in that, mini room. The narthex, she said. It's called a narthex. Sounds like a Star Trek alien. She snorted again, almost choking on her spit. After our talk, I did some digging. I talked to my boss and a couple of the heavy machinery guys, and they all had the impression that the church was about to go down. It was just going to take a lot of work, and the ground wasn't prepared for it yet. They couldn't risk the place being flooded while housing multi-million-dollar industrial equipment. I questioned the need to destroy an old church in a preservation effort for an environmental project. But by now it was a sort of known secret that we were doing something else entirely. I was just there to do a job, and all of it seemed to be perfectly legal, but it still didn't feel right. It's like having your tooth pulled. No matter how gentle the dentist, it's still uncomfortable. The next time I met Eva, she'd put on these thick white gloves and sorted through old wooden debris. I told her about the plans I'd heard, and how none of them seemed all that reliable. The only people who knew for sure were the higher-ups. I didn't really have a timeline or action plan, but they were, indeed, bringing trucks down to do some heavy lifting. You didn't do that for nothing. As I finished explaining, she walked up to me. "Thank you," she said. "I appreciate the effort." She leaned in and gave me a kiss on the cheek. I was so surprised. I turned to her, not knowing what to say. As I did, I got another kiss, this time on the lips. I think it was accidental, but she didn't seem to mind. She hurried off before I could get another one. She had this violet-scented perfume that lingered on me long after she left, making my lips tingle. Or maybe that was my heart. Impossible to tell. Going home that night, something didn't feel right. My stomach kept churning, like my intestines were constantly moving. I kept burping as if someone had carbonated my insides. I could hear a rasping noise every time I exhaled. At first, I thought it was a fungal infection. You can get those around old buildings. I didn't get much sleep. I kept rushing to the bathroom, coughing up this salty black sludge that lingered at the back of my throat. I shone a light in my mouth through the bathroom mirror, and I could see these little dark spots on my tonsils. Even just standing there, tilting my head back, I could feel pressure on my throat, like my blood was thicker, a sort of growing pain. It's hard to explain. I knew I'd fucked up when I heard frogs croak outside. The sun was already rising. I was feeling better, but I was going to have to take a sick day. You don't do well on a construction site with less than 2 hours of sleep. When I returned to the dig a day later, they'd already begun taking out the windows. It seems they'd abandoned the idea of picking them out of the frame and just gone straight to breaking them. There was a man with a steel pipe standing on a ladder, smashing panel after panel. I could hear the glass as it clattered to the ground inside, crashing against the grated steel floor. "Feeling better?" Brogan asked. I hadn't noticed him approaching, so maybe I wasn't all there yet. I still gave him a thumbs up. "Good," he continued. "Don't need more people getting sick." "There are others?" "You kidding me?" he chuckled. "Got 2 drivers with fever, and one who's not answering his phone. You need me to chip in?" "Nah, I need you working the interior. Bring out the pews. All loose shit. Gotta clear for the dozer." I spent most of the day waiting by the stairs, watching a couple frogs struggle to get out of the mud. Weeks of chemical spraying, and there were still frogs around. Maybe there really was an invasive species problem. When they called for a break, I went ahead and headed down. It was strange seeing the place in the light of day. Usually, all sunlight got stuck in the algae-covered windows. I brought a crowbar and got cracking on one of the back pews. I only managed to get one solid push in before there was a tap on my shoulder. Eva. I'd been so focused on my work that I hadn't seen her come in. I could still smell that violet perfume on her. "I want to show you something," she said, lowering her voice. "You got to see this." Now, I'm not one to slack on the job, but we were ahead of schedule, and Eva, I couldn't help but listen to her. She went for the basement, leading the way with a shoulder light. I was a bit hesitant about going downstairs, not want to slip and tumble down. I'd bowl her over like a pin, and then I'd have some explaining to do. It turned out fine, though. The stairs were solid stone. There was something bright down there, but there were no lamps. It was an ambient light coming from somewhere further in. I wasn't sure about the whole thing, but Eva urged me on. She didn't hesitate for a moment. "I checked out the other day," she said. "You weren't around, so I figured I'd keep busy. You miss me?" I asked, half jokingly. I think I did. A little. We came to the bottom of the stairs. It must have been a sort of storage cellar at one point, but most of it had eroded. I could barely make out anything in the debris. It smelled like dry seaweed and mud. And something else. Something flowery. "Watch your step," she said. It's right up ahead. There was a fissure. It stretched from the layered stone wall and into the ground, about 8 feet long, 3 feet across. That's where the light came from. A soft cyan light, shimmering with streaks of bright purple. It had this strange organic pattern, like the inside of a corn cob. It was mesmerizing. I tried speaking 3 times, but I could just make noises. My throat throbbed a little. Finally, I formed the words carefully enough to let them out of my mouth. What the hell is it? It's what they want to destroy, Eva said. You mean we want to destroy? I added. I looked at Eva, but she said nothing. Finally, she put a hand on my cheek. No, she insisted. They, not we. She leaned in to kiss me. This time it was no accident, not even close. And as much as I love her soft touch, something felt wrong. A tickle on my lips, like kissing a nettle. You're not one of us, I whispered. Are you? I'm not. Are you from town? Did you make it over the fence? I'm not from town. There was no more room for more questions. Just soft touches, kisses, and rationalizing. It's amazing how many things you're ready to tell yourself at the sight of a pretty face. Over the next few days, it all sort of turned into a sort of routine. I would go to work, do my job at the church, and meet up with Eva during the slow hours. We'd hide away in the cellar and just spend time together, sometimes cuddling, sometimes talking. She told me about her overprotective father and how he always kept an eye on her. She told me about a cousin of hers who owned a vineyard in France. Little bits and pieces of a life that seemed long and arduous, very different from her otherwise soft demeanor. I'd have a bite to eat and go back to my company-assigned temp apartment. There, I'd either crash instantly or stay up, unable to sleep. Sometimes I'd be sick. Sometimes I'd have my head swimming with pictures or thoughts. It's not like insomnia. It was more like I forgot to be tired. I would end up being bored more than anything. And every time it happened, I wished Eva could be there. Everything felt better with her around. But then one day, they went ahead with the demolition. I wasn't informed. I just got to the site, and it was underway. They'd been working on a ramp for a long time, and now they had it. They brought down a bulldozer and started working through the vestibule and the narthex. Despite standing for over 100 years, the building was going down. There was no stopping it. I could feel my pulse rise as I realized they had no idea that Eva might be down there. There was a crowd standing on the bank of the lake, but I couldn't see Brogan anywhere. I didn't know what got into me, but I pushed through the crowd and grabbed the first important-looking company man I could find. You gotta stop, I said. There's someone in the basement. What? The basement? I repeated. There's someone down there. What basement? The basement under the church. The cellar. It's dash. Before I could continue, the bulldozer plowed on, and as it did, I could hear an eerie sound. Something giving way as the floor cracked. The settlers had planned for a lot, but they hadn't planned for a multi-ton steel machine to roll over their floors. In a matter of seconds, the bulldozer broke through and tipped forward, leaving only the back of it sticking out of the ground. The crowd gasped as men with colorful helmets hurried to help. They managed to get the driver out, but the floor had collapsed. It was a mess. Most of the front of the church was gone, and the bulldozer had gone too far too quickly. The walls were still sturdy, but they were going to come down soon enough. They'd have to find a way to get the bulldozer out and go at it from another angle. All the while, my heart kept pounding away, thinking about Eva being down there. She could be dead. Crushed. I tried to get through, but it was chaos. EMTs were on site to check out the driver, and people were being dispersed. They were calling full stop on all heavy-duty work in the lake for now as they reassessed the situation. I waited for an opportunity to slip by. I skipped dinner, just standing there, waiting. It wasn't until later in the evening when I finally saw an opening. We had armed guards patrolling the area, but they were usually busy with looking for outside threats, especially during early rotation. As soon as they started to fan out, I slipped down to the church, right by the bulldozer, and down the stairs. Eva? I called out. Eva, you in here? It didn't take long for me to spot her, looking past the collapsed floor and bulldozer. She was sitting further in, right next to the fissure, letting her feet dangle into it. The light danced on her face, sending ripples across her skin. She didn't seem to notice I was even there. "We gotta go," I said. "You can't stay here. They're bringing it down. All of it." "I got nowhere else to go," she said. She didn't look up. I noticed she was leaning a little too far ahead. Was she about to jump into the fissure? "You can come with me. Come on." I offered her a hand. She took it, looking up at me. "You sure?" she asked. "Of course. Let's go." I pulled her up. She had this hopeful smile that reminded me of the sun peeking through storm clouds. We made it all the way up the stairs and out the front, ducking under the crumbling church entrance. Eva couldn't bring herself to look at the chaos, so she kept her head down. We made it all the way out to the open sky before we had to stop. There were people up ahead. The guards were back on rotation, and one of them had spotted us emerging from the rubble. He was maybe 40 feet away, but the site was quieter without all the machines running. He could probably hear us long before he saw us. "You're not supposed to be down there," he called out. "What the hell are you doing?" She was someone stuck in the basement. I called back, "It's not safe." He clicked his flashlight and shone a light on us. It was blinding, and I couldn't see his face, but I could hear something in his tone shift. It went from confident and authoritative to trembling in an instant. Something happened, and in the next moment, he called out for help on his walkie-talkie. I turned to Eva as spotlights flared. One by one they went up, covering the entire site in a pale industrial glow. But there were no commands, just panicked voices, screams, someone calling out a code, someone calling out confirmation. Eva looked at me in disbelief, struggling to find the right words. "Do something," one of the guards called out. "Fucking do something." Then gunshots. My eyes were on Eva when the first bullet hit. I saw it enter right above her heart, and as I blinked, something changed. Eva wasn't standing there any longer. I was looking at something else. Something large, maybe 6 feet wide, 8 feet tall. A dozen tendril-like legs sprawled in all directions. A single vaguely humanoid arm unfurled into an unreal 5-jointed mess of a limb. A body of contracting and expanding rubber-like sacs lined with pulsing blue veins, like a bowl of noodles held together by fishing wire. And on the side, the decayed head of a long-dead woman, hanging to the side like an afterthought. A thin sliver of hair hanging from the remains of scalp, all of it breathing like a dying balloon. Another gunshot, then another. I blinked with every blast and watched her change in front of me. In one moment, I saw her as I knew her. In the next, I saw that unworldly thing. She fell to her knees, screaming for help. In the next breath, I'd hear this awful croaking, like a bullfrog in an undulating tunnel. But the image I remember the most was that of the Eva I knew, this soft, beautiful person, being riddled with gunshots, reaching for me. And when I didn't reach back, the betrayal was painted on her face just as true as the bullet holes in her chest. She spoke, and when she did, there was no pain in her voice. And no matter how she looked, the voice stayed the same from one breath to another. "This was your plan, wasn't it?" she said. "To get me outside, make me vulnerable." I covered my head. They were calling for help. Someone was bringing a rifle. I could hear an engine in the distance. Eva looked up. In another form, her skull rotated upwards, looking at the sky. "Father!" she cried. "Father!" I crawled backwards, slipping in the mud. One person was firing a large caliber rifle, stopping only to reload. It didn't faze her in the slightest. I couldn't make out where everything was coming from. I could just see the many lights and the blinking gunfire. My ears rang, but I could barely hear over my own pulse. It had been cloudy all day. I hadn't thought about it, but as Eva looked up, so did I. And up there in the clouds, I could see something move, a swirl as if something stirred. And in a moment that stopped my breath, I saw the dark clouds part, and I looked down, an impossibly large, ceaseless, alien eye. It's impossible to describe that sensation. It's not just the scale, it's the unrealness of it. You can't make sense of what you're seeing. No matter how many monster movies you see or how many books you read, Imagination can only get you so far. But to lay there with dirt on your hands and feeling the rush of the wind as the sky itself changes, as it breaks the rules, is something else entirely. You know your life won't be the same after that. You are reminded that you being alive is nothing but chance and happenstance. And in that moment, I've never felt more human. I made it out of the drain lake as the first drops of rain started to fall. They were backing up with a truck, preparing to do some kind of last-ditch maneuver, maybe run her over. The eye in the sky slowly turned, looking at something to my right-hand side. There was a feeling in the air, like a sudden warmth washing over us. Then I saw a man come undone, one of our on-site guards. His body broke like a cheap gas station wrap as frogs spilled out of him, climbing over one another and dropping haplessly to the ground. Another man next to him followed suit, leaving behind only patches of skin and entrail-stained clothes. Some people started running. The eye turned, silencing another voice. The man driving the truck threw himself out of the driver's seat and ran for the front gates, screaming at the top of his lungs. A cold, panic shriek. Humans aren't meant to sound like that. Then the eye turned to me. I could feel something expanding in my chest. My lungs refused to exhale. I was swelling from the inside out. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't think at all. I couldn't even scream. And as I stared into that impossible thing, I didn't know what to say or do. I could just flail my arms and roll around in the dirt. I was completely, fundamentally powerless. Then it stopped. It turned its attention downward to Eva. She said something, but all I could hear was my heart. Moments later, the eye closed. The sight was abandoned. There was an alarm blaring in the distance. But for a moment, it was just me and Eva on opposite sides. Me up above, her down below. And for a final time, I saw her as she wanted to be seen, a bullet-ridden woman, slipping back into the basement of the church and disappearing into the fissure below. Not a word spoken. The rain whipped into a downpour. The lake was flooded, putting what remained of the building back underwater. Our spotlights couldn't pierce the murky surface, making it look impossibly deep. I sat there watching the hundreds, maybe thousands of frogs diving back into the waters and retreating into the dark below. The rain soaked me, washing the dirt from my hands. I must have been there for hours before the armed guards pulled me away. They handcuffed me and put me in the back of a black car. They spent the next days asking me a lot of uncomfortable questions, and I answered them truthfully. By the end of it, they gave me an ultimatum: to go home and shut up, or to stay in the dark and talk as much as I wanted. They made no promises except that I'd be doing myself a lifelong disservice if I didn't comply. So I made a deal. It wasn't that long ago, I suppose. The days tend to meld together when you can't figure out your sleep. I haven't told the company about how I've been feeling lately. At night, things have gotten worse. The swelling in my throat, the strange insomnia. I've noticed a sort of horizontal slit in my eyes. I got this blind spot that I can't explain, like my eyes are drifting to the side of my head. And sometimes I wake at night hearing frogs croaking, but it's not coming from outside. I look different in the mirror. I feel different. I've felt different ever since that first kiss. And I know I should feel disgusted or angry or scared, but I feel nothing but warmth thinking about Eva and our time together. Yes, even now. I can't help it. As of writing this, my fingers are secreting a mild adhesive, making the keys break loose from the keyboard. I have a softness forming around my neck, like a pouch or sack. I think I know what's happening, and in some strange way, I think I'm okay with it. The lake is still fenced off. Brogan and the crew still work there. From what I understand, they're exploring different options, but they're still hell-bent on breaking that building and taking control of the site. I'm not entirely sure why, but it seems to be a priority worth dying for. There are still trucks running through that little town. I've been moved far away. I get a small check of mail every week, and as long as I keep quiet, I suspect I'll get more. But I'm afraid I'm at a point where I can't show myself in public anymore. I can't recognize myself in the mirror. I can barely understand my own voice. And to this day, there's a part of me that wants to go back. I want to dive into the deep waters, to kick my legs out and just indulge. I want to see Eva for who she is. I want to hold her and be held. And then, only then, will everything be okay. Everything. Story 3. I accepted my rideshare app's VIP upgrade without reading the terms. Now I know why the tips are so good. The world is a different place at 3 a.m. It's quiet. The city holds its breath, and the only sounds are the hum of your own engine and the lonely sigh of a distant train. I know this world better than I know the world of the sun. For the last 2 years, it's been my office. I'm a rideshare driver, and I work the dead hours, from midnight to 6 a.m., the hours when the city sleeps and the weirdness comes out to play. Mostly it's a grind. A few airport runs for red-eye flights. A couple of tired nurses or factory workers getting off a late shift. The money is barely enough to cover my rent, and the ever-increasing cost of just existing. It's a life of constant financial anxiety, of checking your bank balance and feeling that familiar, cold knot in your stomach. But it's a job, and a few months ago, the app won Drive for offering me an upgrade, an invitation to their VIP Navigator program. The email was full of the usual corporate buzzwords: enhanced earning opportunities, exclusive clientele, premium service tier. It promised a way out of the grind. All I had to do was maintain a high rating and opt-in. I clicked the link. It took me to a long, dense page of terms and conditions, a wall of text in a tiny font. I did what everyone does. I scrolled to the bottom, ticked a little box, and clicked I agree without reading a single word. I just wanted more money. I had no idea what I was actually agreeing to. For a couple weeks, nothing changed. I was starting to think it was just another empty corporate promise. Then, the first VIP request came through. It was 2:15 a.m. on a Tuesday. The request pinged with a different, softer chime. The pickup was a standard downtown hotel. The destination was an address on the far outskirts of town, a street name I'd never even seen before. The fare estimate was significant, more than I usually make in half a night. I accepted instantly, a jolt of excitement cutting through my usual late-night fatigue. A man in a crisp, dark suit was waiting under the hotel awning. He looked completely normal, if a little tired, like a businessman who'd just gotten off a long flight. He got into the back seat, gave me a polite curt nod, and said nothing. I confirmed the destination. He grunted an affirmation, and we were off. I followed the app's GPS, my car a silent little bubble moving through the empty, sleeping city. Halfway there, as we were cruising down the main highway that leads out of the city, the app chimed. New route suggested. 10 minutes faster. This was normal. The app often rerouted for traffic or accidents, though there was zero traffic at this hour. The new route directed me off the highway and onto a series of dark, winding back roads. I glanced in the rear-view mirror. The passenger was just sitting there, a silhouette in the back seat, staring out the window. But something felt different about him. The shadows in the back of the car seemed deeper around him, darker, as if he were absorbing the faint light from the dashboard. And for a split second, as we passed under a lone streetlight, I could have sworn his eyes flashed a brief, faint glint of something that was a reflection. I blinked and it was gone. Just a tired man in a suit. I told myself I was just tired. To trust the tech, I thought. The roads became more and more desolate. The houses gave way to fields, the fields to dense black woods. The streetlights disappeared completely. My headlights cut a lonely tunnel through an oppressive, absolute darkness. Finally, the pleasant, robotic voice of the GPS announced, "You have arrived." I stopped the car. We were in the middle of a dark, empty field. There was no house, no driveway, no landmark of any kind. Just tall grass swaying in the night wind and the endless, silent trees. A cold knot of unease tightened in my stomach. Sir?" I said, turning in my seat. "This is a spot. There's nothing here." He turned his head slowly. He was smiling. It was a calm, placid, empty smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Thank you," he said, his voice smooth and even, This is perfect. He got out of the car, closed the door gently, and without another word, he walked off into the darkness, disappearing into the tall grass as if the field had swallowed him whole. I watched until I couldn't see him anymore. I sat there for a full minute, my heart pounding, before the app pinged again. Ride complete. The payment came through. The fare was exactly what was estimated. And then another notification. Your passenger has added a tip. A massive one. A tip that was 3 times the cost of the fare itself. I drove home that night with a sense of profound, chilling strangeness, but also with a wallet that was substantially fatter. I told myself it was just a weirdo, a guy meeting someone for a shady deal, or just a rich eccentric who liked being dropped off in fields. The money made it easy to rationalize. It made the weirdness a feature, not a bug. But then it kept happening. The rides became a strange, terrifying, incredibly lucrative new routine. A week later, I got a ping from the Old Wharf District. The pickup was at the end of a long, foggy pier. The air tasted of salt and decay, and the only sound was the black water lapping against the rotting pylons below. A woman was waiting, a lone figure at the end of the pier. She was beautiful, dressed in a long, dark coat, but as she approached the car, she moved with a strange, fluid grace, almost like she didn't have a skeleton. She flowed into the back seat. The rear out came almost immediately, taking us away from the city and toward an industrial wasteland of abandoned canneries and rusting warehouses. I glanced in the rear-view mirror as she shifted in her seat. For a split second, under the dim interior light, her skin seemed to ripple. It wasn't a trick of the light. It was like watching a badly rendered special effect, a digital texture struggling to stay mapped onto an object. I snapped my eyes back to the road, my hands gripping the steering wheel. The drop-off was in front of a massive, derelict factory, its windows like 1,000 empty, black eyes. She got out with that same watery grace and vanished into shadows of the building. The tip was, once again, obscene. A few nights after that, I was sent to a quiet dead-end street in a wealthy suburb. The houses were all dark. A young man was waiting under a streetlight. He seemed agitated, constantly fidgeting. He got into the car in awkward haste, and I immediately noticed a long, thick lump on the back of his coat, right at the base of his spine. My first thought was a weapon, but the shape was wrong. It was too long, too flexible. As he settled into the seat, it moved. A distinct serpentine twitch. It was a tail. He felt me see it, I think. He froze, then tried to adjust his coat with a pained, embarrassed expression. The entire ride, he sat rigid, his shame and my terror creating a thick, unbearable silence in the car. The app took us to the dead center of a massive, old bridge that spanned a dry, rocky riverbed. He got out, gave me a look that was a strange mix of a warning and a shared curse secret, and then walked to the railing and just stood there, looking down. I didn't stay to watch. The weirdest was the young girl. The pickup was a university library, just after midnight. She couldn't have been more than 19. She got into the back and didn't say a single word. She just sat there, smiling at me in the rear-view mirror. It was a wide, constant, unblinking smile. As we passed under a streetlight, the light flashed across her face, and I saw her teeth. They weren't fangs, not like a vampire in a movie, but every single tooth, from inside of the molar, was honed to a perfect, carnivorous point, like a mouthful of tiny white daggers. She knew I'd seen them. Her smile widened a silent, gleeful threat. The app led us to the gates of an old, long-abandoned asylum on a hill overlooking the city. She got out and just stood by the gate as I drove away. Her smile the last thing I saw in my mirror. I was making incredible money, more than I had ever dreamed of. I was paying my bills, saving, finally getting ahead. But the unease was growing into a constant, low-grade terror. I was a ferryman, a chauffeur for something else, and the car wasn't entirely mine anymore. I found that out the hard way. One night, I had another silent man in the back, the kind whose presence felt like a block of ice. The app tried to reroute me down a dark, unpaved service road into the woods. I'd had enough. My nerves were shot. I ignored it. I stayed on the brightly lit main road. The car's electronics began to fail. The radio, which had been off, burst to life with a deafening shriek of pure white static. The headlights flickered, then died completely, plunging us into absolute darkness on the highway. The engine began to sputter, to cough, the car lurching and slowing. I pumped the gas pedal, but it was useless. The car was dying. From the back seat, a low, calm voice spoke for the first time. I really wouldn't do that if I were you. I looked in the rearview mirror. The man was leaning forward, his face obscured by the total darkness. The chosen road is always the safest path, he said, his voice a smooth, cold whisper. Straying from it can lead to unexpected destinations, unpleasant ones, for both of us. A cold sweat broke out on my skin. I wrenched the steering wheel, turning the dying car back toward the turnoff to the service road. The moment my tires hit the dirt, the engine roared back to life. The headlights snapped on at full brightness. The static from the radio cut out. The car was fine. I was no longer in control. I made the turn. I completed the ride. I took the money. But something inside me had broken. I had to know. I couldn't live with the not knowing anymore. Last week, I got a request. A young woman picked up from a downtown bar. The ride was the usual routine. The reroute, the silent journey, the drop-off in an abandoned, graffiti-covered factory, the huge tip. But this time, I had a plan. I had her name from the app. When I got home, my hand shaking, I typed her name into a social media search bar. Her profile popped up immediately. It was her. Same smiling face, same haircut. Her profile was public. I scrolled through her photos. There she was. In a picture posted just an hour before I had picked her up, she was at the bar, laughing with friends, a drink in her hand. The caption read, "Girls' night, so good to be out." I felt a moment of relief. She was a normal person, a real person. Maybe this was all just some elaborate, weird urban exploration game for rich eccentrics. Then I scrolled further down her profile, and my world fell out from under me. The post directly below the picture from the bar was from her sister. It was dated the next day, but the year was 5 years ago. It was a memorial post, a collage of her smiling pictures with a long, heartbreaking caption. "Can't believe it's been 5 years since we lost you. I still think about you every day. That night after you left the bar, I wish you had just taken a cab home. I wish that drunk driver hadn't run that red light. We miss you so much." I stared at the screen, at the smiling face of the woman I had just dropped off at an abandoned factory, and at the memorial post mourning her death in a car accident 5 years ago. My mind shattered. The pieces clicked into a place I had refused to let them go. If she was dead, what about the others? The woman with the rippling skin? The man with the tail? The girl with the sharp teeth? Were they ghosts too? Or were they something else entirely? Things from a place even darker than the grave. Using my car, my app, as their own private taxi service between worlds? The money. It suddenly felt filthy, tainted. It was the price of my silence, my complicity. I had to get rid of it. I had to sever my connection to this whole thing. The next morning, I went to my bank. I walked up to the ATM, my heart pounding. I was going to withdraw every single cent I had earned from these rides and donate it to a charity. Just get away from me. I put my card in, entered my PIN, and selected check balance. I stared at the screen. My checking account, my savings account, they were both nearly empty. The same meager balance I'd had 3 months ago, before the VIP program had started. This was wrong. There should have been tens of thousands of dollars in there. I took my card and went inside to a human teller. I explained the situation. She typed my details into her computer, a confused frown on her face. "Sir," she said, turning the monitor towards me, "there are no large deposits on your account. The transaction history is just your regular paycheck and your usual small rideshare payouts. There's no record of these tips you're talking about." I rushed home, my mind a screaming wreck. I pulled up the driver app on my phone. I went to my earnings history. It was all gone. Weeks and weeks of VIP rides, of massive fares and obscene tips. They had been wiped clean. The app showed no record of them ever happening. It was as if I had imagined the whole thing. But I knew I hadn't. I knew what I had done. I had broken the rules. I had looked behind the curtain. I had read the terms and conditions the hard way. Don't ask questions. Don't get curious. Just drive. My payment wasn't money. My payment was my ignorance. And the moment I gave that up, they took the money back. The VIP ride stopped after that. Completely. The app went back to normal, feeding me the occasional, low-paying airport run. The silence in my car at night was no longer peaceful. It was heavy, expectant. I was back to being broke. But now I was broke and haunted. Yesterday, I came home from a long and profitable night of driving, and I found an envelope had been slipped under my apartment door. There was no stamp, no address, just a single folded piece of high-quality, cream-colored paper. I opened it. The text was printed in a crisp, clean, corporate font. Notice of service tier reassignment. Dear Navigator, it has come to our attention that your activity has been in violation of the terms agreed upon in the VIP Navigator User Agreement. Section 7, subsection C. Discretion and non-disclosure. All accrued premium incentives have been forfeited as per the contract. Your account has been returned to standard service tier, effective immediately. We thank you for your service. And that was it. A corporate memo from hell. A pink slip from the underworld. I don't know what to do. I'm trapped. I'm back in my old, desperate life. But now I know what the silence of the city at night really holds. I know what kind of passengers are waiting on those dark street corners. And I know there's a secret. Hidden transit system moving all around us, operating on rules I can't begin to comprehend. I broke my contract. They took my money. But I can't shake the feeling that they didn't take everything they were owed. I feel like I'm still on their books. And I'm terrified that one day I'm going to get a ride request, not as a driver, but as a passenger. And the drop-off will be somewhere dark and desolate and final. Story 4. There's an app where strangers follow your every command. I tried to stop it. One day, I stumbled upon the app. I was just messing around on my phone, bored out of my mind one afternoon, scrolling through every bit of nonsense that popped up. That's when I saw it. This weird little app buried among the others. Its oddly eye-catching icon instantly grabbed my attention. But when I opened it, things got even stranger. The app looked like TikTok. People appeared in the videos, but every single one was labeled as live. At least, that's what it claimed. Most of the people in the videos were just waiting, like they were preparing for something or expecting something to happen. It all seemed pretty boring at first, until the comments started rolling in. I was watching a guy. His whole room was covered in cameras, but he was just sitting there on his couch, doing nothing, just staring into space, like he was waiting. Then someone dropped a comment. Stand up and grab a glass of water. And the guy on live video followed the command. Instantly, like it wasn't even a choice, just something he had to do. It was weird, especially because he didn't look at his phone, or screen, or anything. He just knew what to do. I stared at my phone screen, squinting in disbelief. Then another viewer joined the stream. Now there were 3 of us watching this young guy walk into the kitchen and pour himself a glass of water. But once he did, he just stood there. He didn't drink it, didn't spill it, just stood in the kitchen, holding the glass. Then another comment popped up. A dog runs in and you spill the water. Suddenly, in the live feed, a small mutt dashed past the guy's legs and bumped into him. He flinched and the water splashed out of the glass. I couldn't make sense of it. What was this app? What were these people doing? Why was everyone acting so strange? Still, I kept watching. Curiosity got the better of me. Eventually, I decided to join in, just with something harmless. Make a sandwich. And the guy, he opened a fridge and started making one, like he had no choice. I was stunned. What kind of twisted thing was this? These people on the app were doing everything they were told. Who in their right mind would ever agree to something like this? I watched as the guy made himself a pretty decent sandwich. A strange mix of feelings swirled inside me. It was unsettling, someone taking comments as commands, and at the same time, it felt like I was playing The Sims. When he finished the sandwich, I was just about to type, "Eat it," when another viewer beat me to it. "Shove the sandwich up your ass." I winced at the comment. When I looked back at the stream, the guy was already taking off his pants. I have never scrolled away from a video faster in my life. What the actual fuck is this? And why are people such absolute pieces of shit? I clicked into another stream. This time, it was a woman painting her room. It all seemed calm until I looked closer at what she was painting with. It was her own feces. The last comment confirmed it, followed by a flood of laughing emojis. That's when I just gave up. I scrolled through a few more, hoping not to lose all faith in humanity. But it only got worse. It was early evening, prime time for these so-called live robots, and the app was swarming with lunatics. People were giving the most deranged, vile commands to these poor souls. In just a few minutes, I saw everything, from sadomasochistic porn to self-harm to full-on violent abuse, all carried out by strangers to strangers. It was a plague, a festering digital hell. And I thought, that's enough internet for today. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about the horrors I'd seen. Even if some of these people chose to be in this situation or were forced into it, why did the viewers always have to ask for the worst possible things? It was like some sick joke from the dark web. The best I could think to do was to report the app anonymously to the police. I sent everything I had, hoping they'd be able to do something with it. But in the meantime, I figured I'd keep watch. Maybe I could help the people still trapped inside. So I started leaving harmless comments. Anything prevent bloodshed. I hoped I could make a difference. Maybe offer some kind of peace to these poor souls. That afternoon, after I got home from work and finished my usual chores, I sat down and opened the app again. Luckily, not many people were online yet. A few random viewers were lurking, and most of the streamers were just waiting, sitting or lying in their rooms, motionless, staring into nothing, waiting for the next command. But that gave me the perfect chance to launch my sabotage plan. My idea was simple. I'd give as many of them as possible long, complicated tasks, ones that would keep them busy during the danger hours, when viewer numbers tend to spike and things usually go to hell. So I started typing. I told them to clean the entire room with a toothbrush until everything sparkled. To master the guitar perfectly. To cook a 4-course meal for a crew of 20, each dish different. Anything I could think of to keep them occupied, to protect them from what was coming. It was working until the viewer count started to rise. What I didn't count on was that the other viewers would twist all my commands. The guy I told to bake something, he was now hacking other people to pieces with an axe. Another was slicing open his own abdomen. The rest, I didn't even want to look anymore. I tried fighting back against some of the commenters. Every time someone posted some sick, twisted suggestion, I would instantly reply with something safe, something that wouldn't let the person on stream hurt themselves or anyone else. But I couldn't keep up for long. It was like every stream was flooded with commands, orders to mutilate themselves or torture others. The whole app was a fucking cesspool again. I just collapsed into bed, exhausted. My soul felt crushed by everything I'd seen, and by the fact that most of the commenters were absolute monsters. They were making these people do things no sane person would ever think of. Just thinking about it made me sick. This was happening every day, on this app. I barely slept that night. And the next day, I don't even want to talk about it. Those faces burned themselves into my mind. The torture, the perversions, the constant stream of twisted orders pouring in from strangers. Even at work, I couldn't stop thinking about it. How could I stop this? How could I at least help somehow, until the police finally did something? Back home, whenever I had a free moment, I opened the app again. My new plan was simple. If I couldn't protect everyone, I'd focus on just one person. Let me save one person. Just for a night. I hoped I'd be able to. What I didn't expect was who the app showed me when I opened it. It was a young girl. She was sitting in a simple living room, wearing a college hoodie. Cameras were filming her from almost every angle. As I glanced at the comment section, a message immediately popped up. It was from a user named Cherry Delry. But the message wasn't addressed to the girl. It was for me. Please don't hurt her. I'm begging you. She didn't do anything wrong. Just move on. Find someone else. She's my daughter. I was completely shocked. That was the moment the whole thing hit me. Really hit me. These people I'd been watching suffer for 2 days straight. They were real. They were once just normal people. Then another message popped up, again from Cherry, directed at me. Please, I'm begging you, don't give her any commands. Please. I quickly replied, hoping to ease her panic. I won't write anything. Don't worry. I think this whole thing is horrible too. I never thought I'd find a kindred soul here of all places. But it turned out that Cherry Delry was actually the mother of the girl I was now watching live. Her daughter had gone missing months ago. No one had found her. Not the police, not the locals, no trace, nothing. Then, one day, Cherry found her daughter's phone. And on it, this app, that's when she discovered her daughter had a profile and was already part of the live stream. It was all just horrifying. Cherry and I talked a lot in the chat. We agreed not to reveal anything personal about ourselves, just in case someone was watching. Whenever someone joined her daughter's live stream, we attacked the chat immediately, flooding it with harmless commands, so nothing awful could happen to her. For the first time in days, I felt like I'd done something good. Together, we managed to protect a young girl. Cherry told me she watched her daughter almost all day. She'd already shown the footage to the police, but they didn't really believe her. All they said was, "We've opened an investigation." Bastards. Cherry and I made a pact. I would help protect her daughter too. Together. We'd try to keep her alive until someone in law enforcement finally took action. I'd never done anything like this before, but I followed Cherry's daughter's profile in the app. I had to keep an eye on her. The next day, Cherry and I were successful again. We took turns watching over her. A few lunatics jumped into the stream and immediately started flooding the chat with commands, telling the girl to do all sorts of things to herself. But luckily, we shut them down in time. But how long are we supposed to keep doing this? The people who should really be shutting this whole thing down, why aren't they doing anything? Maybe it's time to go to the media? I talked a lot with Cherry, too. She told me a few things about her daughter. She got into college on a gymnastics scholarship. Super smart girl. Just spent a little too much time on her phone instead of studying. Cherry also talked a little bit about herself, though only in broad strokes, just enough to avoid giving away anything that could cause trouble later. Honestly, I didn't always trust her either, but she was protecting the girl, same as I was. So maybe I could trust a mother who was willing to do anything to protect her daughter. Cherry offered to stay up late and keep watch. She said she didn't have anything better to do anyway. I, on the other hand, was completely exhausted, especially at 4 a.m., knowing I had to work in the morning. So I went to bed for a few hours. All my energy had been drained trying to keep the girls safe. I slept like a rock. After 2 nights of staying up that long, I was totally worn out. But in the morning, I woke up to a surprise. Before heading out to work, I quickly opened the app to check on Cherry's daughter. But Cherry wasn't there among the viewers. No one was watching her daughter. Where did Cherry go? Maybe she just got tired. Maybe she went to sleep? I didn't have time to dwell on it. I had to leave or I'd be late for work. So I rushed out the door. But I would check the app again later during the day, just to be safe. Cherry was offline the entire morning. She didn't check on her daughter at all. At work, I couldn't really keep an eye on things. My boss wasn't exactly a fan of people being on their phones during office hours. But I faked stomach issues a few times just to slip off to the bathroom and check what was going on. Thankfully, the girl mostly just stood or sat there waiting. But I had no idea what to do if Cherry didn't come back. I didn't think I could protect her daughter on my own. What happened to Cherry? Where did she go? Was she just sleeping? I practically ran home from work. Cherry had been unreachable all day. And since it was Friday, more and more people were becoming active on the app. I typed as fast as I could. Whenever someone entered the girl's stream, I tried my best to protect her. I'm sorry, but I couldn't do it anymore. By 9 p.m., there were so many people flooding Cherry's daughter's stream that it became impossible to keep things peaceful. They were sending her horrific messages. I can't say I was surprised. People like that, when they can control a 20-year-old girl like a puppet, they always show their worst selves. It was a nightmare, and my heart broke, but I left the stream. I couldn't keep watching this innocent young girl, with a blank face like a machine, carry out the most disgusting commands thrown at her. That night, I just cried. Are people really this cruel when they get a little power over someone else? As I was getting ready for bed, I checked the app one last time. Maybe something had changed. Maybe Cherry had come back. Maybe she was watching her daughter again. But the girl's stream was no longer available. She wasn't even listed among my followed channels anymore. There was only one thing that could mean. The girl was dead. I couldn't even cry anymore. These past few days have been a complete nightmare since the moment I found that cursed app. I sat on the edge of my bed, completely shattered. The app was still running on my phone, and the streams just kept rolling in, one horrifying scene after another. Then, suddenly, my phone auto-launched a new live feed. It had a brand new label. It showed an overweight man standing in the middle of his room in nothing but underwear. The walls were covered with posters, disgusting ones, mostly of children. But what truly shocked me was a username. The stream was being broadcast from an account named Cherry Delry. It was him. Cherry was visible on my profile again, but not like before. This time, I couldn't message him anymore. Now, they were the one in the live stream, but who the hell was that man? Cherry was supposed to be a mother. At least that's what they claimed. Someone trying to protect her daughter from a twisted online app. My mind was in total chaos. What the actual fuck was going on here? Who lied to me? What happened to Cherry? Or was she ever real in the first place? That's when my phone buzzed. It was the app. A cold sweat ran down my back. This had never happened before. I'd never gotten a notification from it. When I checked it, I saw I had a message from the admin. Here's your friend. Watch him and do whatever you want. This is a private privilege. Just for you. 24 hours. I was completely stunned. Not just because the app admin had contacted me directly, but because Cherry had lied to me. She wasn't a mother. He was just some perverted freak who tried to claim a girl for himself. A girl who looked barely of age through some grotesque, horrific app. There are no words for what I felt sitting there on my bed. My entire world had flipped upside down. And now, for a full day, this disgusting worm of a human was placed in my hands, entrusted to my good intentions. Does someone like that deserve a terrible death? Or should I just let someone else take care of the dirty work? I just suffered until dawn. I wandered the apartment, pacing. Then I tried to sleep, but the thoughts racing through my mind wouldn't let me rest. Sometimes I glanced back at the fat man, the one who pretended to be a desperate mother online. Just the sight of him made my stomach turn. How many people had he deceived already? And yet, he just stood there in his disgusting room, motionless, like always. I felt betrayed, lied to, stupid. How could I have been so fucking naive? Disgusting worm. And the worst part? I helped him. I helped him trap a victim. I beat myself up over for hours, but in the end, I felt like I deserved to be the one to take revenge. Cherry, or whatever the hell this thing was going to suffer anyway. If not by my hand, then someone else's. But someone would make him pay. So I typed in the chat. I kept it simple. Clear, even for someone like him. Surrounded by child porn posters on his walls, I gave him a dignified death. Cherry reached down and slit his own throat with a knife. He bled out right there on the floor of his filthy room. The whole thing devastated me. I think he deserved it. But was I really his killer? I couldn't decide. I just kept spiraling. Until I finally fell asleep, I woke up with a jolt. The events from the night before were still gnawing at me. The moment I sat up in bed, my hand reached for my phone. I wanted to check the app, but I couldn't open it. It was still on my phone, but when I tapped it, a message popped up. Access denied. Your account has been banned. Somehow it was a relief. At last, I didn't have access to that horror anymore. But it also pissed me off. Why was I banned? Did they still want something from me? The morning dragged on. I couldn't focus on anything. It felt like my mind was somewhere else, not even in this world anymore. I could barely eat, sipped on coffee, forced down a banana. I told myself that after this nightmare of a week, this Saturday should just be a quiet day. Stay home. Try to ease back into normal life. That's when my phone buzzed. The app. The message was simple. The stream is starting. What stream? What the hell is this? I opened the notification, and my phone slipped right out of my hand. It was a live stream, just like always. But this time, it was my living room on the screen. I stood there in my pajamas, staring at myself. I was live now, too. Story 5. The rats are covered in yellow powder. I have not been well these past few months. My wife and I had as amicable a divorce as you could imagine. Unfortunately, I'm the type who puts his thoughts on a wheel and lets them spin until they come back to center again. It must have been thousands of times that I thought about how different my life would be if I could have just swallowed the words and forgotten. But I didn't swallow the words, and my life isn't different. At night, I could lie still for a while. But then I'd jolt awake, flinching at the thought of the empty room in my house. A clawing hand would grip my stomach and pull up. Where is it? It always ran through my head. The room was empty and something was supposed to be in them. I needed to get out. So when my office offered the opportunity to get out of town, I took it without a second thought. I'm a financial bookkeeper. For the most part, it's a fairly simple job, tedious and frustrating, but simple. However, a young man had requested some assistance in managing his deceased grandfather's estate. Mr. Geltman worked fully with paper and organized it all in such a way that only a man who had built up the system over the course of decades could figure it out. The house was old but well maintained. Mr. Geltman had clearly loved it, and people that love something take care of them. They should anyway. Geltman was a collector of novelty clocks, garden gnomes, baseball bats, and of course, documents. Every room left just enough space for a slightly overweight old man to squeeze through. Originally, I was supposed to meet Vince, the inheritor, at the property to get shown around, but he decided rather quickly that he had a dead man's wallet to start emptying and had instead flown to Las Vegas. I doubt he would have been able to help me anyways. It took 4 days just to organize everything in a way that was somewhat trackable. Geltman kept incredibly detailed papers. The actual act of balancing it all was rather quick. My job wasn't really to balance the books anyways. Geltman had turned improper taxes all his life. Nothing needed to be solved. My real job was to make decades of careful bookkeeping digestible to a clueless 20-something. And convince Vince to keep us on as a permanent part of his future endeavors. Death. It all started smelling like death. A burning, pungent death. I had taken over a wooden desk in a small reading room. In a matter of moments, I went from typing in numbers on a laptop to gripping my mouth and kneeling over to stop myself from covering the floor in bile. I stuffed my nostrils with tissue paper till the skin of my nose was stretched into a half circle. The smell was strong enough to get through to my head, but it was subdued enough to not reach my stomach. Pushing a cabinet out of the way, I saw a small hole and a fine yellow powder pressed into the wall. The hole was gnawed, small rough bites being taken out of the wood. Looking around, I found a broom and a pan, swept it up and headed towards a trash can that was waiting near the side of the road outside. I don't know what the powder is, but I had no doubt that the smell comes from it. My arms were fully extended to keep the pan as far from me as possible. When I turned the lid of the bin up, a scurry of feet hit the side of the plastic and poured out the side, the wave of rats disappearing into the grass. I covered the street in a soft beige. Inside the trash bin was a pile of yellow powder. It was so overwhelming. I felt like a child again, staring into a toilet bowl begging my mom to make the pain stop as another buildup about climbed up my throat. I turned the nozzle on the hose and rinsed my mouth out before taking off my shirt and spraying down my front. Water was good. It was really good. A few nails and a bit of leftover wood in the shed out back later, I blocked the hole inside and went to bed. The hole was twice as big when I woke up. I moved my setup to a different room. It took about half a day, but I went into town and talked to a man at a hardware store that looked like he knew how to kill rats and came back with a number of buckets, cans, peanut butter, and a metal lockbox to keep my food in. As the man explained in extreme detail, if you cover a soda can in peanut butter and place it precariously on a bit of wire over a bucket filled with water, rats will climb on the wire to get to the peanut butter. The can will spin, and the rats hit the water where they drown. I set up 5 of these buckets, and let me tell you, they work. When I checked the next day, the first bucket had 3 separate rats loosely floating at the top of the water. The smell hit me, but it wasn't nearly as strong as before. I was very happy that I had also purchased some gloves. Each bucket was lifted up and taken to the nearby pond where I dumped them out. When I had emptied the final one, I noted that the ones on the first had started to dry out in the sun. A faint yellow haze lifted from them, visible in the sunlight like dust in a window beam. Even happier, I got the gloves. I grabbed one of the rats that had begun to dry, and I gently shook it. A swarm of yellow powder was left behind in movement, like a kid with dandruff running their fingers through their hair. More holes had appeared in the house, and I had begun to feel more than a little disturbed. I was planning to get a motel when I realized that I didn't smell death. In that stupid way humans act when the scent was gone, I instinctually leaned closer to the rat to ensure that the smell was gone. It smelled like the sheets of my bed. Not the bed I'd left behind, but the one I had before. It smelled like an argument over what to eat for dinner. It smelled like the pages of a copy of What to Expect in the First Year and a trip to IKEA. It smelled like a filled room. I was in that headspace for a bit until I heard the sound of a titter behind me. Staring at me from the grass was a possum, its white face pulled back in fits of effort. Once it knew I was aware of its presence, it walked slowly into the woods, a cloud of yellow powder rising up with every movement of its coat. I followed it. Deeper into the woods we went. It was like I had just woken up from a bad dream. The opossum stopped in front of a bone-white cliffside with numbered gaps, each specific and unnatural, like they were carved out by a machine. The opossum pressed its back against the wall and rubbed back and forth until the yellow powder had formed a small layer on top of the rock. Its 5 clawed hands reached out unnaturally and began to draw. It etched out a small visage of its kin. The powder began to seep into the rock, and the rock began to seep out of itself. A small bundle of flesh pushing its way out of pure stone. It pushed and pushed and pushed until the sack fell out on the leafy ground. The opossum picked it up and placed it on its back. The newborn clung to its mother. I watched it all calmly, and when it was over, the opossum pressed its side to the wall once more, leaving another layer of yellow powder, its beady eyes staring at me. Its mouth was pulling at the seams in spurts of uncontrollable noise. Small laughter escaping into my ear despite the efforts it put forward. Then it left. I went back to sleep. Death once again filtered into my nostrils. The smooth aroma returned to its pungent roots. I covered my mouth and found myself unwilling to move. It was there and I used it to draw. I gave my daughter her mother's eyes. I gave my daughter the full eyebrows that were on my face. I gave her hair, ears, arms, legs, blood, guts, and a smile. And nothing happened. My eyes stayed still on the visage, but remained simply a cliffside. When I returned to the old house, I was tired and went to bed. Daddy, my body stretched up with my mind, catching up as I sprinted to the door. Daddy, my hand slammed into the light switch and the hallway turned bright. The door across from mine was closed. I'm scared. The door wouldn't open. I could hear her on the other side. Her voice was shaking and desperate. Mine was probably the same. I slammed my body into the door. The solid wood didn't give. Please, where are you? Running into another room, I took one of Geltman's bats, and I swung, over and over until the door fell down. It was an empty room. It will always be an empty room. As I stared into the nothing, a small sound of laughter began to ring out. Standing out on the window sill was the opossum. Its once restrained joy fully burst forth in wave after wave of laughter. When I woke up the next day, the door was destroyed, just as I left it. But the rats were gone, and the stone face was without a single blemish. Vince didn't care about the door. He was too drunk to care about anything. And frankly, I didn't care about it either. It's not like the door was guarding anything anyway. I absently went through the numbers before I finally went home. It was probably too late at that point, but I got a therapist. It's nice to talk about everything, but I don't want to tell them about this. I just want to put it out there so it's not solely on my shoulders and try not to think about it anymore. I'm hopeful that maybe someday I'll be able to swallow it down and use that room for something. Story 6. Something feels off with the people around me, but no one else seems to notice. It started with Diego. He's been my best friend since middle school, the kind of guy who never shuts up during soccer matches. We were hanging out at his apartment, talking about a trip we might take, when he said, "Man, if we go to Cusco, I'm definitely bringing my drone." I laughed, nodded, and kept scrolling on my phone. Not even 30 seconds later, he leaned forward, same grin on his face, and said, "Man, if we go to Cusco, I'm definitely bringing my drone." Word for word. Same tone. Same laugh afterward. "Wait," I said. "You just said that." Diego looked at me like I'd grown a second head. "No, I didn't. Are you okay?" That was the first crack. The next was my mom calling me by an old nickname she never used. Nico Cho. She hasn't said that since I was 5. When I asked her why she suddenly brought it back, she froze for a second, then said, "What are you talking about? I've always called you that." I brushed it off, tried to, but it kept happening. Laura, my girlfriend, told me one night about this amazing beach we went together last summer. The thing is, we never went. I remember working all through July. I told her that. She tilted her head like a doll that doesn't quite understand the question and said, "No, Nico, don't you remember? It's in the script." I laughed nervously. The script? What script? But she just smiled too wide and kissed my cheek. It was a cafe incident that really shook me. There's this place near campus where I always order orange juice. That day, the barista, a cheerful girl named Camila, came back with a black coffee. Sorry, I ordered orange juice," I said. She looked straight at me, smile fading, and whispered, "It's not in the script." Silence. My stomach dropped. "What did you say?" Camila blinked like nothing had happened. "Orange juice, right? Sorry about that." She rushed off, leaving me sitting there with a coffee that was still steaming. I started noticing patterns. Cars on the main avenue stopping at the exact same rhythm. Conversations repeating in the same sequence when I walked past strangers. Even the stray dog by the bookstore, scratching its ear at the same second every afternoon. One night, I confronted Laura. "I need you to tell me the truth," I said. "What's going on? With you, with everything. Is this real?" She was brushing her hair, sitting at my desk. Her hand froze mid-stroke. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, without turning around, she said, "Don't think too much, Nico. It's not healthy." Her voice was flat, mechanical. I didn't sleep that night. Yesterday was the breaking point. I woke up and found my dad sitting in the chair across from my bed. He wasn't supposed to be there. He lives in another city. "Dad," I said. He didn't answer, just stared at me. His eyes looked wrong, like glass. Finally, in a low, distorted voice, he spoke. "You're reaching the limit of the environment." I froze. What the hell does that mean? This isn't life. It's simulation. When he blinked, for the briefest second, I swear I saw a blue screen flicker across his pupils, like a computer crash. I bolted out of my room, out of the house. But outside, it wasn't the neighborhood anymore. It was white, endless. A blank space stretching forever, and in the middle of it, a glowing door. I don't remember deciding to open it, but I did. On the other side, I heard a voice, not my dad's, not anyone's. Deep, echoing, everywhere at once. System reset. Subject will be reinserted into the simulation. And then black. I woke up in my bed this morning. Sunlight poured through curtains. My phone buzzed with messages from Diego, joking about the soccer match that night. Everything looked normal, except my dad was still sitting in that chair. I told myself it had to be a dream, a leftover hallucination from lack of sleep, but then he slowly turned his head toward me. His mouth moved, and I braced a metallic voice. Instead, he whispered, almost gently, "Nico, you have to stop asking questions." And then he smiled, just a normal, tired smile. For a second, I almost believed it, almost convinced myself I'd imagined everything. But then I remembered Camille at the cafe, the way her voice dropped, flat and lifeless, when she handed me the wrong drink. It's not in the script. And I can't stop thinking, what the hell does that even mean? Story 7. If you ever find a website called Carcass, please don't go into it. I knew that my actions would catch up to me one day. My hedonistic wallowing for the last 2 years, my self-neglect, my disregard of any responsibility, has finally turned round and bitten me. I know repeated exposure over the years has probably desensitized me to gore, but this is something else entirely. I know that now. The visions won't leave my dreams. The stench of rot won't leave my nostrils. I can't sleep without hearing its wretched voice gurgling against my eardrums, pleading with me to carry out its purpose. I know that it will soon break me, that I'll have no other choice but to surrender to its desires, and I have no other way to fix my wrongdoings, other than to warn others. If you ever find a website called Carcass, do not go into it. My first visit to the site was over a week ago. For the last 2 years, I've been a nobody, a recluse living in a small apartment by myself. I don't go out nearly as often as I should. I work a dead-end remote job, and most of my social interaction is online. Like any other person in my predicament, I made a habit of scouring message boards, social media, anything that would provide some sort of input to my dull dopamine receptors. I even started using a Tor browser to find things that I wouldn't have been able to on the ClearNet. The deep web is really not that scary when you know what you're doing. It's basically a slightly more secure version of the internet. I heard about Carcass through a message board on there, some off-brand deep web imitation of 4chan, which I've forgotten the name of. I'd been scrolling the paranormal board, try to find any websites or scary stories or esoteric theories that might keep my brain occupied. I found the usual schizoposts and discussions about the occult, until one thread stuck out at me. It read, "Fuck Laviism, Hermeticism, Satanism, and all that other horseshit. Come and commune with the real mother of all mothers. Come and gaze upon the carcass of the old world, and join us to bear the fruits of the next." Underneath was a typical 32-character string of a.onion site. I figured it was another schizopost, or some kind of obscure cult trying to recruit misanthropic edgy teenagers on the deep web. Nevertheless, my nails scraped the keyboard as I clicked the link. The site loaded in surprisingly quickly. Pop-ups littered the edges of my screen, obnoxiously pulsing with loud, brightly colored animations. As my eyes adjusted to the flashing images before me, I realized that they contained saturated pictures of dead bodies, both human and animal. They were all in different states. Some were burned, some were in advanced stages of decomposition. Great, another shock site. My edgy teenager hypothesis was starting to seem more credible. The description of the site read, "Welcome to Carcass Onion." When so much suffering exists in the physical world, it's hard to not look for redemption in the metaphysical. For centuries, people have tried to find justification for their own mortal suffering, through religion, through philosophy, and they'd be right in a sense. The answers do lie beyond our bodies, beyond our souls, beyond our feeble comprehension. But the catch is, how do we guarantee our happiness after life? How do we feed the metaphysical? How do we comprehend the incomprehensible? Our mother, who has no name, has shown us the path. Will you trust us to illuminate yours? I mean, the kid who wrote this was obviously creative. I just wish they'd put their talents into, I don't know, college or a job, or something rather than this degenerate bullshit. I scrolled down, revealing the usual distastefully named posts one might find on a gore site. Jam spill, in which the viewer sees the aftermath of a shotgun suicide. King Chomp, a video of a crocodile attack. All things that appealed to my morbid curiosity, that disgusted me, but made me feel something, anything other than the boredom that always lurked in the four walls of this apartment. But the contentment was momentary, as it always was. I continued to scroll until I reached the end of the page and arrived at a heading. Video of the day. It read, 1 Peter 2 verse 2, a bastard is born under our mother's wing. Almost involuntarily, I proceeded. The website automatically went a full screen. Uncomfortable with the notion of this website overriding my Tor browser, I fumbled to press my ESC key. The moment I did, a pop-up immediately appeared. No, now you bear witness. Well, fuck. Admittedly unsettled, I pressed on. The video appeared to be CCTV footage of a barn. Static wiggled across the footage as the camera focused on a dark mass in the near corner. I couldn't tell what it was at first. Its grotesque, disproportionate shape made it difficult to discern. I eventually forced a resemblance in my head. It was a horse, but it still appeared wrong. Its joints bent at random angles, its legs kinked and twisted, the muscles on its flank bunched up in a tight mass that clung to its oversized body. Its torso was humongous and bloated, almost egg-shaped, cartoonishly inflated beyond proportions of the rest of its body. It lay on its side, presumably too malformed to stand. Then I heard the muffled acoustics of a man's voice, speaking in a language I didn't understand. His voice was taut with emotion, which grew to desperation as the grotesque creature's abdomen swirled and contorted. I watched in horror as the beast's belly split open and expelled a large beige-colored mass. The static subsided to reveal a woman, limp and weak, now lying in a pool of blood and afterbirth on the harsh hay. The man ran into frame, cradling the emaciated figure in his arms and weeping. However, this weeping wasn't pained. It was relieved, almost joyful. I looked back at the horse, its torso sunken and deflated like a rotting pumpkin. I stared at the grisly scene, unable to take my eyes off what I was seeing, until the browser exited full screen again, surrendering its control back to me. It took me a moment to even begin to rationalize what I'd seen. Realistically, this must have been special effects for some indie horror movie that never saw the light of day, or some ghoulishly accurate AI-generated shit. It took me a second to register that there was another pop-up on my screen. That is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange Ian's even death may die. H.P. Lovecraft. Get fucked, I thought, shutting down my browser. I didn't want to admit to myself that some edgy kid's art project had shaken me up. It took 2 hours and a melatonin pill to finally send me to sleep. My dreams were peppered with the visceral images I'd seen, and I woke up unsettled. This probably wasn't helped by the fact that my computer now appeared to have some sort of virus. Tabs on my browser were opening and closing, and my screen became littered with TXT files filled with Bible verses and doomsday ramblings. I swore at my screen. How had my browser been compromised so easily? My tired eyes scanned the screen in a last-ditch effort to find a way out. Another pop-up appeared. You seek retribution through any means but the one presented. Why? I tried to click out again, to no avail. Another pop-up. Those who don't give will be taken instead. My inner monologue sounded louder upon reading this, almost palatable in my mind. Images began to flash on my screen, more mutilation and viscera, and things I couldn't comprehend in the short time I had to process them. I unplugged my computer from the wall, but the images only persisted in my mind. At first, the next few days were better in a sense. Not having a computer meant I had to find other ways to entertain myself. I tidied my apartment, even went on walks. But the words and images I'd seen kept flashing across my mind. They'd come when I least expected it, seeping across my schemas like treacle, burying themselves into the crevasses of my brain. They echoed in my dreams, snipping my rest short, and they began to tell me to do things. They were small things at first, like intrusive thoughts, but louder, more urgent. Smash your phone. Put your cutlery in the microwave. In my sleep-deprived stupor, the voice became all too real. I started doing the things it asked. When it asked me to smash my phone, I did it. When it asked me to buy a gun, I did it. And when it told me to kill the fox I found on my walk, I did it. Each action was rewarded. The voices would stop. Every little piece I cut off from the mundanity of my life was another offering to quiet the screaming chatter in my skull. But now I can't give it what it wants. It wants human life. I cannot bring myself to fulfill this task, and now it is punishing me. It took 2 Xanax for me to sleep last night, and I fear even that won't work tonight. All I can hope for is that someone stops me before I do something terrible. Oh, mother, I wish to sleep. Story 8. Lock your room carefully before going to bed. Otherwise, I didn't believe in ghosts. My life revolved around the obvious: work, food, clothing, and daily hustle and bustle. But everything began to change the night I forgot to lock my bedroom door. That night, the clock was just past 2 in the morning, and I was awakened by a very small click. I turned around and suddenly realized that my bedroom door was slightly ajar. I was sure I had closed it, but I couldn't remember if I had locked it. In the darkness, I saw something standing in the doorway, tall and thin, motionless. I thought I was seeing things, but the shadow was too real to be an illusion. I closed my eyes, pretending to sleep, but just a few seconds later, I heard slow footsteps approaching the bed. Someone's cold breath was close to my ear, and a hoarse voice whispered, "You're lucky this time. I'm just dropping by. Remember to lock the door next time." The next morning, everything was normal. The door was closed, with no sign of forced entry. I told myself it must be a dream, but in my subconscious, I knew something had really entered my room. Over the next few days, I began to notice strange changes. Every morning, the chair in my room would be pulled out of place, even though I was sure I had not touched it. Another night, while I was sleeping, I clearly felt someone sitting on the edge of my bed. The weight was so real that the mattress caved in. But when I turned on the light, there was no one. The scariest thing was when I woke up at 3:13 a.m. to find my diary open, stopped at a page I had not written on. Scrawled on the page were the words, "Lock the door or they will come in." I began to investigate the apartment I was renting. It turned out that the previous occupant of this room had disappeared without a trace. The elderly neighbor downstairs said that the victim finally disappeared after complaining that someone was always standing right at the door looking in at night. I searched through old newspapers and found at least 3 other missing persons cases in the same building, all unsolved. The only thing in common, all the victims disappeared at night, and they had previously mentioned that the bedroom door was not locked. In the following days, things became more and more tense. Every night I locked the door, but in the morning I found the lock unlocked. I tried turning on the camera, but the recording always disappeared right around 3 a.m., replaced by a black screen. One night, I couldn't stand it anymore, so I decided to pretend to be asleep and observe. At exactly 3:13 a.m., the lock made a soft click sound and the door slowly opened. A thin, dark figure, taller than the door frame, walked in. It bent down, its face obscured in the darkness, but its eyes were bright red. It whispered again, "Locking the door is just a rule. You broke it." Then it placed an old piece of paper on my desk. It said, "Once the door is open, they won't stop. If you want to survive, find the first one." I started having the same dream. I woke up, found myself standing in the hallway of the building in front of my own room. Inside, I saw another version of me sleeping, and something was crawling out of the darkness towards the bed. I wanted to scream, but couldn't. The dream repeated itself many times, each time more clearly, like a warning. After many days of searching, I found information about the first person who had ever gone missing here, a girl named Sarah, who had lived in this room more than 20 years ago. She famously kept a diary, the last of which read, "Every night they knock on the door. if I forget to lock it. I'm afraid I'll never wake up. But the diary was left unfinished, the last page torn. No one knows where she went. The deeper I delve into the truth, the more it seems like this is not just a curse, but a cruel game. Maybe they don't kill immediately, but let the person in this room destroy themselves with obsession, then slowly drag them down to the abyss. Tonight, as I write these lines, it's almost 3 a.m. I hear the familiar click at the door. The lock is turning. Even though I've locked it firmly, I know this time they'll come in. If I disappear after the night, maybe someone else will rent this room again, and the game continues. I thought I would never have the chance to write another word after that night. But the next morning, I woke up to find myself still in bed, the door closed. Only the mirror hanging on the wall did not reflect my image. I tried standing in front of the mirror, raising my hand, even hitting it hard, but the mirror only showed an empty room. I looked around and everything was exactly the same. So, why did the mirror refuse to acknowledge my existence? The longer I looked, the more I realized that there was a shadow moving in the mirror, but it was not me. It was someone else, standing motionless right where I was, but with his head tilted slightly and his mouth smiling. On the table, the old paper from the day before disappeared, replaced by a black leather notebook. When I opened it, I saw scribbled pages mixed with the writing of many different people, probably from people who had been in this room. Some lines were trembling as if written in fear. They came in for the third time tonight. I locked the door but still couldn't escape. Don't let anyone know the truth. If you tell them, they'll come sooner. The first one wasn't Sarah. The first one was me. The last page had the same handwriting as mine, but I never wrote, "It's your turn." I tried to find the neighbors to ask more, but strangely, most of the doors were locked. No one answered. Finally, only an old man on the 5th floor was willing to talk. He said, "You still don't understand? That room isn't for living. It's a trap." I asked what kind of trap. The old man just kept silent and laughed dryly. "Whoever stays too long will replace the previous one. Then the new one will become the first one." The next night, I dreamed again of standing in the hallway looking into my own room. But this time it was different. I clearly saw that there was not just one me sleeping on the bed, but 2 or 3 identical versions. Each one turned their backs to a different direction, breathing lightly. And in the dark corner, a tall, thin figure stood there, looking at each version in turn, then pointing at me, the one watching from the hallway. I suddenly understood. Perhaps I was just one of countless copies, and whether real or fake was no longer important. I decided not to sleep anymore. I prepared a knife, a candle, and tore through the pages of my notebook to find clues. In the middle of a notebook, there was a page with a picture of a door with the words written below. "To escape, you must open the door from the inside, but if you open it, they will come in." I sat there, stunned. If I locked the door, I would be stuck in a loop. If I opened the door, I would have to face them directly. At exactly 3:13, the familiar click sounded again, but this time, the lock did not open by itself. Instead, a voice called out from outside. "You must choose. Stay forever, or open the door and become the next one." I trembled as I held the doorknob. Outside, I felt many cold hands waiting. My heart pounded, and I thought, maybe I was never the main character. Maybe I was just a link in an endless chain. If I opened the door, I would know the truth. But if I opened it, would I still be me? I looked up, took one last look at the mirror. In the mirror, I was smiling, whispering hoarsely. "It's time." Locking the door or opening the door is just a prearranged choice. That night, the neighbors heard the sound of the door opening, then silence. The next morning, room 304 was empty again. The landlord had posted a rental notice. No one knew where the previous tenant had gone. Only the black leather notebook lay on the table, the first page of which bore a new line. "I forgot to lock the bedroom door, and now it's your turn." A week later, room number 304 had a new tenant. I don't know whether I am writing these lines as the old one, the new one, or just an echo left in these 4 walls. But I clearly remember the face of a girl who walked in, young, carrying a small suitcase and a bright smile. She cleaned up a bit, rearranged the tables and chairs, and hung the mirror in its original place. I stood in the dark corner, watching every familiar gesture, as if I had witnessed it dozens of times before. That night, she forgot to lock the door. I heard the familiar click. The door opened slightly. A tall, thin figure walked in silently, as if the darkness in the room had risen into shape by itself. A cold breath blew down the nape of the girl's neck as she slept. A hoarse whisper. "Luckily, you didn't lock the door today." I shivered, because that sentence was exactly like what I had heard on the first night. Only this time I whispered along, almost in unison with it. The next morning, a black leather notebook appeared on the girl's desk. The last page had a new line, written in shaky but familiar handwriting. "If you've read this far, it means I've disappeared. Don't believe anything in this story, or believe everything. Whatever." I don't know when I wrote that line, or did the girl write it, or did someone else. The second night, the girl locked the door carefully, but at exactly 3:13, the lock turned by itself and the door slowly opened. She sat up, grabbing the knife hidden under her pillow. I witnessed everything, but couldn't stop it. The tall, thin figure walked in, slowly, rhythmically. The girl screamed and rushed forward, but the knife went through the air. The black figure tilted its head, chuckled, then it turned to look at me, who was standing in the corner of the room, completely unrecognized by the girl. I wanted to scream, "Don't open the door," but the words wouldn't come out of my throat. Everything was dark. When I woke up, I found myself lying on the bed, the door closed. There was no girl, no knife, no scream. There was only the black leather notebook on my chest. On the first page was a new line, written neatly and sharply. "The story is over, but you are still here." I quickly flipped to the last page. The line I had written had disappeared, replaced by a short sentence. "Remember to lock your bedroom door next time." I looked up. The door was ajar. Story 9. Creature in the Sewers. At night, I was walking home along a deserted street. In my hands, I held my smartphone and was watching a new video. The cool night air brushed against my face, and the street lamps flickered intermittently as I focused entirely on the screen. Completely absorbed in what was happening on the screen, I didn't notice the asphalt giving way beneath my feet. At first, I didn't even realize what had happened. I fell through the ground. I grabbed the edges of an open manhole with my hands and one foot. My smartphone, still playing the video, tumbled down. A splash marked its landing in the sewer waters. My hands and legs ached from the impact, while my other leg dangled inside the shaft. I could feel the cold metal biting into my skin, and the echo of dripping water surrounded me. I cursed. I didn't want to lose my phone. A dim light glowed below. On one side of the shaft, metal rungs descended. I moved over and began climbing down to retrieve the phone. The metal rungs were wet. My boots slipped several times. The stench of the sewer filled my nostrils. About halfway down, another smell joined the stench of the sewer. It reminded me of something like a rotting, unknown decay. A shiver ran down my spine as I tried to steady myself against the damp wall. Reaching the bottom, I looked around. In the dim glow of the lamp overhead, I saw a tunnel stretching further. Its floor was submerged in dirty liquid. On the other side, a hollow in the wall revealed something that made my blood run cold. A heap of human corpses. Some were missing arms and legs. Others were only partial bodies, tore at the edges as if someone had devoured them. The stench of rot I had noticed earlier emanated from them. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering, unable to tear my eyes away from the grisly sight. As I stood in horror staring at the pile of bodies, splashes of dirty liquid sounded behind me. I turned in terror and saw a tall and skinny figure standing in the twilight of the tunnel, about 30 feet away. The hairs on my head bristled with even greater fear. It was not human, its bald head tilted to one side. 2 fires glowed in its eye sockets. Long arms with elongated fingers and claws reached forward as if it were preparing to pounce on its next victim. And it seemed at this time, the victim was me. A cold sweat ran down my back as adrenaline surged through my veins. I lunged and scrambled onto the metal rungs, climbing frantically. I don't remember how I made it all the way up. It felt like I had soared to the top. Lying on the asphalt, I caught my breath. Suddenly, a searing pain shot through my leg. I spun around and saw a long, blue claw clutching my leg just above my boot. It stretched out from the sewer hatch. The creature's bald skull emerged from inside. Fiery lights in its eye sockets glared at me with hatred. The terrifying claw began dragging me toward the open hatch. I screamed in horror and kicked wildly, trying to break free. A few of my strikes hit their mark and distracted the creature for a moment. Its claw released me. I got to my feet and ran. In the following days, I avoided that street, returning home by other routes. I was left with a wound on my leg, as if from a burn. It took a long time to heal and left a prominent scar in its wake. I bought a new phone. My old device had perished irretrievably in the sewer tunnel's filth, or so I thought until recently. Strangely, I received a message from my old, drowned phone number. It read, "I'm hunting you." Story 10. My name is Lloyd. I'm writing this in a coffee shop in town. It's a pretty small coffee shop, not many visitors. And I need to document this. It was a very cold night. I was trying to sleep. I've been looking after my mom's house for her while she's away on a business trip. It's the same house on the outskirts of town she's lived in for years. The house itself isn't bad. It's the neighbors. I was in my bed, watching, you guessed it, more SpongeBob. You can't keep me away from that thing. I know it's childish, but that square sponge really hits a home. Anyways, I was so engrossed in SpongeBob that when I heard a hello in my mother's voice, it spooked me like crazy. Then I heard a bark of laughter. What the fuck? Mom. She's supposed to be gone for 3 more days. A cold, hard anger replaced the fear. Whoever's, I yelled, my voice cracking. I couldn't get the words out. I grabbed my phone and flashed the light out the window, scanning the black trees. Nothing. Just an empty, silent yard. I stood there, confused and on edge, the beam of my flashlight cutting a useless hole in the darkness. I took a breath in. Then, as I walked back to my door, I caught a glimpse of something I cannot describe. For what felt like an hour, but was likely only a minute. I could hear soft screech noises outside my windows. Then I heard it again. "Daniel, sweetie, could you come outside?" My name is not Daniel. It's Lloyd. Whatever is out there be trying to make me come outside. "Who's there?" I called out. Admittedly, looking back, that was maybe a bad idea. My question obviously played into its game. In response, I heard a loud crash from the back of the house. Scared out of my mind, I scrambled further under the bed. Luckily for me, that was the sound of the window cracking but not shattering. A cold, eerie voice that resembled my mother spoke out again. "It's me, your mother. I want you out." I decided to not respond. I was more confused on a monster's attempt at speaking after about 12 minutes. The sounds disappeared. I poked my head out, looked around, and took a sigh of relief. I went to my window. Looking back, I never should have done it. I parted the drape, and there it was, a gaunt figure staring at me. I jumped back in terror, yelling, "H, what the F-U-C-K?" Whatever was out there knew I'd check eventually, and if that thing could smile, I think it would have. As next, I heard the most terrifying thing ever, a loud S-A-I. The thing disappeared. Alone with my thoughts, I decided to not sit here like a sitting duck. I walked out of my room. Luckily, the house had drapes across the other windows already. I opened a drawer and pulled a gun out. The thing wasn't loaded, so I sat there for 3 minutes fumbling around with it, trying to load it. I was so focused on the metallic clicks and fumbling with the magazine that I didn't hear the shattering glass or the sounds of it breaking into my room. A click! Sound emanated as I finally loaded it. Now, I like to think of myself as a brave person. I was telling myself, you can do this, man, you got this. I stumbled back to my window in my room, but what I found was horrible. Glass was shattered. The window was gone. My bed was roughed up. There were signs of an entry with claw marks across the bed. Pieces of wood and blood were all over my bed. It was horrible. I almost threw up. I slammed the door shut and walked into the kitchen. Whatever was looking for me gave up pretty quickly, or so I hope. As I hear, "Mommies, lose zero oaking after you," around my front door area. In a panic, I shot around into the door, and I heard a deafening R-A-U-H-H. If anything, that pissed it off, as a slam at my front door was followed by another, then by the door slightly giving way. I threw the dresser down in front of the door and ran out the broken window to my station outside bike and pedaled like I'd never pedaled before. I never saw that monster again. As I'm here sipping my coffee and writing, I can't help but imagine what might have happened had I stayed under my bed. I won't tell anyone, as who would believe me? All right, guys, that's all. It's outside the coffee shop.